two dope dudes, bringing you the news, leading you to much success with all their insightful views. Do you grow yourself or buy from the top shelf? Are you here to take the reins and gain back your health? Whatever it is, you know the biz. Leave a light, crack a pipe, and let's get on with it. If you want to acquire the knowledge, you don't have to go to college. You can just come hang with Aaron and Dave.
Hey, welcome to the Elevated News Podcast with Two Dope Dudes. We are your source for Midwest cannabis news, culture, and more. I'm Aaron,
I'm Dave.
and we're the Two Dope Dudes. What's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm genuinely pumped right now.
Oh yeah, me too. Me too.
I
Been looking forward to this one, 100%.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean pre-show, obviously I won't spoil anything. The person we were talking to, the person that we'll bring up, and you've probably seen it by the name of it. Her name is Amanda. She reminds me so much of the person that I learned cannabis from. Just a awesome wealth of knowledge and somebody who's actually been doing the real thing. She's on the ground, she's in the trenches, she's, building laws, and she's done a lot of really cool stuff. So somebody I cannot wait to get into a conversation with.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
I was just looking. It is. I apologize for last week. I had a migraine and we couldn't record, so I was just looking back at the YouTube comments and seeing if there was anything that needed to be addressed. I don't think there is anything that needed to be addressed. Thank you, as always, to anybody who joins the live chat or listens in on the audio. I just wanted to get that out of the way. But we are super excited for our guest today, and so we are going to curtail some of the normal silliness that Dave and I like to do for you. Um,
Yeah.
that is sometimes just for us and sometimes just for you, but and bring our guest on right away. Her name is Dr. Amanda Reiman. I believe I said that right. She has been, if you've been paying attention to cannabis, she's been around probably as long as you can remember. She is a scientist and activist and has been involved in the cannabis game for many, many years. And we're very excited to have her. So please welcome her to the Elevated News Podcast.
Hi,
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much for being here. Honestly, like I was saying pre-show, and I'm sure you heard me, and I'm not just trying to fluff you. There's something about you and what you're doing that resonates so much with me. But for those who don't know who you are, do you mind introducing yourself? Where you come from? What are your accolades? Yeah.
Sure. So I grew up in the Midwest, high school in Indiana, college in Chicago. And I really got involved in the cannabis movement in the late 90s when Students for Sensible Drug Policy formed. I was in school, I was studying psychology and later social work. And I was really taken by the social injustice associated with drug prohibition. Without launching into all of it, and we can definitely get into it if you want, but drug laws are always about social control. It's about, who's using what drug and how do we create laws that allow us to search them and detain them and incarcerate them. And that was really troubling to me, having grown up in an upper middle class, very suburban environment, and never really having to understand that because of my privilege. And when I learned about that, I really wanted to get involved in the social justice reform related to drug policy. So I figured that the only way to really change the laws to when people would actually listen to me was to get a PhD. I was like, I want to be in the room with the lawmakers, with the deciders. I want them to look at me as an expert. So I decided to apply to UC Berkeley to get my PhD in social welfare. I got in. I moved to Oakland, California in 2002. and was totally flabbergasted by the medical cannabis scene. It was nothing we had heard about in Chicago. I was still buying cannabis from my guy on the South Side, and using a pager, which explain to kids now what pagers are and how you had to like home by the phone so that
Or
they could,
calling cards,
right, and tell you
recorders.
I'm at the gas station in Bridgeport and come down. And so when I moved to California, I got a medical cannabis card. I have a number of different illnesses that cannabis is beneficial for. I don't mind talking about them if you'd like, but I started going to medical cannabis dispensaries. And having come from the environment of Chicago in the late 90s and what it meant to buy cannabis to a dispensary in Oakland with like edibles and all of these little jars were labeled with the cultivar. I mean, it was just, it floored me. And I decided to study it. You know, I felt like, first of all, this was something that was not happening in the rest of the country. I wanted people to know about what was happening. Early medical cannabis dispensaries very much followed a community health service model, which was inspired by the AIDS, HIV community movement and the LGBTQ population in San Francisco. And it was a very unique model that you did not find in traditional healthcare. So I wanted to capture that. I wanted people to know about it. And I also felt that cannabis was kind of the lowest hanging fruit to changing the drug laws. And just to be clear, I believe in full all drug legalization. I do not think people should ever go to jail for possessing and using a substance. The fact that, you know, alcohol is legal and OxyContin is legal, but if I'm caught with cocaine, it ruins my life. I just don't think that's right. And when we factor in the racism that's built into how drugs are policed, it's really not right. So cannabis was kind of this entree. They talk about it as the gateway drug. It was kind of the gateway drug for people to be okay with taking a drug that was illegal and making it legal and kind of destigmatizing it and giving access to it. So I really wanted to focus my efforts on changing cannabis laws. And that's really what I embarked on doing after I got my PhD in 2006. I actually did my doctoral dissertation on the role that dispensaries played as health service providers. There were very few of us at that time, like 2005, 2006, doing research on the benefits of cannabis. So after I graduated, I went to work for Berkeley Patients Group, which is one of the oldest dispensaries in the country. I did my first studies on cannabis as a substitute for alcohol and other drugs, which we didn't really know people were doing except anecdotally. I then went to work for the Drug Policy Alliance as the manager of marijuana law and policy, where I helped draft and run the campaign for Prop 64. Then I moved up to the Emerald Triangle in California, Mendocino County, and really worked with the farmer community and local community organizations to try to roll out legalization. And I kept doing research. So, you know, research is really my passion. It's what I love doing. In 2020, I founded Personal Plants, which is really my way to take research and translate it into actionable steps that the public could take to have a healthy relationship with cannabis. So just kind of coming full circle, my main goal now is to be the middle voice, right? You have the prohibitionists who are like, cannabis is the devil's lettuce. It's terrible. Never use it. It's going to cause you to go crazy and become addicted. And then you have a lot of activists who downplay the risks and say there is no such thing as cannabis dependence. There is no such thing as THC overdose. You can use as much cannabis as you want. It treats every medical condition alive. And I'm in the middle, right? So I'm like, yes, cannabis has a myriad of health benefits. And we can talk about the science about why that is in a little more depth if you want. Cannabis also has risks, just like everything. And even though we compare cannabis to alcohol quite frequently, I actually think, and I have an article on my website about this, that cannabis is better compared to exercise. You know, both cannabis and exercise are inherently healthy activities. They're good for your body likes it, it's going to help you feel better and live longer. But if I do the wrong exercise for my body, if I exercise even though I'm injured, if I push myself beyond my body's limits, I could get hurt. I could end up harming myself instead of helping myself. So just like cannabis, exercise is about finding balance. It's about changing your exercise habits as you get older and better understand how your body is evolving. So I really want to help people develop that long, healthy relationship with cannabis in a world where capitalism just wants us to mindlessly consume everything. Cannabis is way too important of a plant for us to mindlessly consume her. So I think it's really important that we have mindfulness around our consumption, that we understand both the risks and benefits. And that's really what I'm preaching now after being in this industry for over 2 decades.
I am a massive fan of that approach, honestly. I heard you say in another thing that here I got it written down so that I don't mess with the understanding here. You said medical and the super intoxicated are kind of the outliers where there's like the mass population of people who are consuming this thing are general symptom alleviation, right? Like you, and that's where I've always stood the grounds of too. I actually recently I do audiobooks. I don't read books, but Yuval Noah Harari made Sapiens. What I'm listening to now is Homo Deus. He presents this idea of medicine versus upgrades, where if we create bionic legs for a kid who doesn't have the capacity of using his legs, we've healed something. We've made medicine of that equipment. At the same time, if we put those bionic legs onto somebody who is fully healthy and we use those, now we've upgraded that human. And I think that it just rang to me so much for how like cannabis plays in this relationship where there is very much so a medical side of it, which is a part of it that I care about deeply because I've seen so many people get this thing. But I also I mentioned that medical cannabis use in a prolonged instance is always medical. Cannabis use for if you're doing it more than once every weekend or on the weekends to get a little fun feel, it's probably a medical use of it. You just don't understand why it is. And maybe it's not medical as much as it is that upgrade. So I'm really in that same kind of camp you're speaking on that like I'm not the one who wants to do 6 foot bong rips or get inside of a tent with a leaf blower hooked up to a big
Not
burning.
anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Well, listen, we all go through our phases, but yeah,
Hey,
no,
I've worn the gas mask. Like
yeah,
I get
yeah. It used to be my main form of consumption was a gas mask. So there's been times, but yeah, I respect that from you a bunch. The one thing that you say during this that I hope you don't mind talking on more. Um, there's harms in cannabis. And after looking at it for a very long time, um, what is the harm more from misusing cannabis or from overusing cannabis? And obviously there's both sides, but where is the bigger harm and what are the big harms of cannabis?
Well, that's a great question. So, first, just to address your first point about medical versus wellness versus recreation, they're really blurred in a lot of ways. And when we talk to consumers, over half of them say they use cannabis for multiple reasons. So, just I like to use myself as an example. This is an N equals one. So, this is not scientifically valid. This is just my experience. But I have an autoimmune condition. I use 600 milligrams of CBD every morning in order to help manage my autoimmune condition. I also am a perimenopausal woman and who has trouble sleeping, and I use 10 milligrams of CBN every night before I go to bed. And sometimes I take 5 milligrams of THC on a Saturday because I want to relax and I want to go watch a funny movie and I want to just kind of have that elevated experience. I consider those to be three different use cases. The CBD is medical. I'm not getting high from that. I'm using it because there are receptors, CB2 receptors in the autoimmune system. There is research that shows that autoimmune conditions can be impacted by very high doses of CBD. So I take that. The CBN is wellness. Sleep, very important. I don't have insomnia. I don't have a sleep disorder, but because of hormonal issues, I have trouble sleeping. So I want to enhance my wellness by getting a good night's sleep. Taking THC on a Saturday to relax and to go have a good time at a museum, I would consider that recreation, right? I'm not doing it because I'm really stressed and need anxiety relief. And I'm not doing it to treat a medical condition. I'm doing it because it's fun and I enjoy it. And I'd rather use that than alcohol or some other substance in order to achieve that same effect. So I think that there does exist pure recreational use. There also exists pure medical use. But like you said, those are the minority of cases. What most people we're seeing from research are using cannabis for is sleep, anxiety, stress, which I would consider wellness, right? So I can't sleep, I'm anxious, I'm stressed out. Cannabis helps alleviate those things and bring me a sense of wellness. And that's what the majority are using for, even though those same people could sometimes be using for medical, right? They have back surgery and they want to use cannabis instead of OxyContin after surgery. Are using for recreation because they're going kayaking and they want it to enhance their sensory experience. So the lines are kind of blurred. And I think that's important because your second question was about harms. So I want to clarify that cannabis has risk and those risks may turn into harms. Not necessarily, but there's like a point that we can look at and say, okay, what you're doing presents risk. And whether or not that risk ends up in harm is going to have to do with the frequency with which you take that risk, who you are as a person, and your likelihood of experiencing harm from that certain risk, and the motivation for taking that risk. So, one of the risks of using cannabis is smoking. Smoking is not beneficial to your health. It doesn't matter what you're smoking. Now, cannabis has a different set of risks when it comes to smoking than cigarettes, primarily because people who smoke cigarettes smoke like 10 to 20 cigarettes a day.
Both
And
combustion and vaporization.
vaporization has less risk, but it doesn't have no risk.
Correct.
So research on vaporization shows that there's still what they call ppm, which are these teeny tiny little molecules that get into your lungs. That's still there in vaporization. It's less than combustion, but it's not zero. So
Correct.
this idea about risk related to smoking. Now, if that is going to become a harm, depends on how often you do it. So if I'm smoking a joint or two a week, that's probably not going to result in any harm for me unless I already have COPD or emphysema or some other lung condition where smoking anything puts me at a greater risk. And then also the motivation for doing it. I went through a period in my life where I was a very mindless cannabis consumer. And it was because I'd been doing it for so long and had such a high tolerance that it was like eating chips in front of the TV, right? And I was a joint smoker. Like that was my preferred method of consumption. So, and I lived where I had access to abundant cannabis flower. So I would sit there and I would smoke a joint. And then before I knew it, 30 minutes later, I was smoking another joint. And then 30 minutes later, I was smoking another joint. And I wasn't really getting high because I've been using cannabis at such high levels for so long, but I wasn't really aware of what I was doing. So just like looking down and realizing I'd eaten the whole bag of chips, I was looking down and realizing, holy shit, I almost smoked like an eighth of weed today. And so I think that there are risks associated with the type of consumption. Now, edibles also have risks, right? Delayed onset. The stronger form that edibles become when they pass through the liver. The fact that a lot of inexperienced consumers use edibles, so they don't really know what their right dose is. Those are all risks from edibles. Now, another risk is that I'm someone who's predisposed to psychiatric issues, mental health issues. So, psychosis, schizophrenia, severe depression, panic. And I'm using cannabis in a way that's too much for my system. Or maybe I shouldn't be using it at all, but I use it and it sparks something in me that brings on a mental health situation. Now, other people may never have that risk. So I think that we're talking about things that may result in a harmful outcome, but whether or not they result in a harmful outcome is going to depend on a myriad of factors, which is why it's so important to understand your own personal relationship with cannabis and to use cannabis mindfully and to understand that both sides are lying to you. That the side that's telling you that cannabis is super harmful and addictive and mental health for everyone bad is lying to you. And the people that tell you that there's absolutely no risk to smoking cannabis and you can smoke as much as you want and nothing's going to happen and there's no connection between cannabis and mental health issues, those people are also lying to you. Now, I can get into why, because there's a very good reason that we have this all or nothing viewpoint of cannabis. But again, the middle, right?
Did you want a new podcast? Because just welcome home. Because
Yeah.
like she's Louise. Jeez Louise. Yeah, no, that's great. You're welcome on anytime, please. Anything.
Happy to be anytime.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I also try very regularly while I'm speaking to mention and not discredit the harm that is possible with excessive use. But I also say the same thing you do, where it's like, take your health back into your hands. This is you doing it for you. I can guide you as much as I possibly can. And I also, and like, I can bring on as many experts as there are, but like at some point you have to at least give some try to some of the things. And the way that you speak on this is perfect to me, because it's like, it's low and slow, right? Like, I think that's the whole industry's type of thing, but it's like, do this thing at a pace where, you're not going to hurt yourself. I can give you the guardrails where you're not going to hurt yourself, but if there happens to be a negative effect that comes of it, I can tell you also a ton of ways for you to kind of get away from that also, And I know that you have some tips and tricks, and I just wanted you to give yours to everybody that's listening, if there is, what's excessive use and how do we deal with it?
So first of all, I want to make a little disclaimer, which I should have done before. Medical use, like true medical, is a very different story when it comes to tolerance and amount of consumption and even method of consumption. So just quickly, let's put the medical users over here, meaning if you're somebody that's using cannabis for chronic pain, for example, and you have a chronic pain like attack, meaning that it's neuropathic pain, boom, that signal hits, boom, that pain hits. Migraine, Aaron, I think is another really good example. Then you may decide that inhalation is your best bet because you're going to feel it right away and you're in pain right now. And the idea of not getting high may actually be a benefit to you. So if you have to use cannabis and go to work, if you have to use cannabis and go pick up your kids, then you might say, look, I don't want to be overly intoxicated from this joint. I needed to just hit the pain, hit it quick, and let me get on with my day. So that is a different type of scenario than what most people are experiencing, which is I'm using cannabis as a benefit, as a wellness enhancer. And then you kind of get into, well, how do I manage harms? So what are the tips? Well, a THC overdose basically means that you took in more THC than you intended and you're having a negative outcome. We can overdose on anything. Overdosing does not mean it's fatal. And I want to be very clear about that, because a lot of times, because you cannot fatally overdose on THC, which is true, people say there's no such thing as a THC overdose, which is not true. So, some of the symptoms of a THC overdose include increased heart rate, a feeling of panic, a feeling of being overwhelmed, in rare cases, passing out because it causes a severe drop in blood pressure, sometimes called greening out. So, if you're experiencing any of these symptoms, the good thing to know, first of all, is it's not going to kill you, which is important. Secondly, it's important to be in an environment where you feel comfortable. So if you're at a concert or a festival or a loud, chaotic party and you start feeling these effects, go to a quiet place, get some water, get some food. And if you're really feeling overwhelmed and panicky, there are some kind of mind body exercises you can go through where you can name something that you can touch, name something you can see, name something you can hear, and it helps bring you back into your body and helps feel calm. Good to have someone with you just because they can help assure you that you're going to be okay and know that it will pass, that it is uncomfortable for sure in the moment. And any of us, which I've definitely been through this, know that in the moment it feels like it's going to last forever. It's also a state of high suggestibility. So if you're with someone that's having a THC overdose, I say it is not a good idea to say, dude, you're going to feel like this for like 5 hours. Or, man, I've never seen anyone this high before. Or, this happened to my friend and they never came down. Like, don't, not good things to say. Good things to say are, you're going to be fine. This is not dangerous. This is going to pass. If it feels like they're having trouble breathing or they seem to be in a very severe state of panic, it is not unheard of to call EMTs because they will be able to at least make the person feel calmer. But, to be honest, EMTs don't necessarily know what to do in this situation either. Many years ago, I went to an event at the Berkeley Fire Department, and this was the fire department that serviced the campus. And I asked them, what's the most common call you get from the UC Berkeley campus? And they said, weed overdose. And I said, okay, what do you tell them to do when you get there? And they say, oh, I just tell them to have a beer and watch some cartoons. I was like, do not tell them to drink alcohol, my friend.
Yeah, it's the worst.
So they don't even necessarily know what they're dealing with. So sometimes, to your point, Dave, like you've got to be your own advocate and you've got to be the expert on your health because you cannot count on those around you to know what to do.
I think I'm sorry to interject. I think it kind of lends to your point that you've said before, and that stories actually change laws, and we always harp on it's legislators not having education and how they, especially in Illinois, I know you're in the lovely state of California, I believe, but Illinois
Washington.
is or Washington. Well, Illinois is just Illinoising up. We have the most Illinois market of all Illinois, and the legislators are ridiculous, and it's you got to have the stories that change the laws. You got to have it affect the people, and you got to share it out there.
Yeah,
100%.
I think one of the things I listened to recently, you did mention exactly what Aaron's saying, where somebody who tells a story to somebody, or if it's like somebody who was closely affected by it. And we literally got an example of it during the rescheduling executive order signing when Trump has outwardly said, I don't like intoxication. He said it in every platform that he possibly can. But then he looked over at his friend and went, but he got help from this thing. So I think we just progress and move it forward. And I don't know that, honestly, this is my big thing, is like the people who are able to sign that order and do that thing, no matter whatever, they don't really know what they're signing off on. They have a feeling towards, or it's, I think you said something about, you don't change your mind, you change your mind with your heart. And then, like that whole thing rang so true to me when and I brought it all back together watching Trump do his thing too. It's like, all right. And I think that that's why I do I try my best to be on as many platforms as I can and advocate for proper use of cannabis. One of the things that I like the way you speak on things, and I want to hear your take on it. Um, how much cannabis use, when you say medical, okay, how much cannabis use is direct condition treatment? Because I have my take on this comparatively to how many of the things is symptom alleviation. And should people realize that often conditions are literal classifications of consistent symptoms, like chronic pain. Pain doesn't necessarily show itself as like a outlying marker under a microscope. Comparatively to, it ends up being associated to inflammation, spasticity, headache, nausea, any of the myriad of symptoms. So what's your take? How much is direct condition treatment compared to how much is symptom alleviation, and where should we draw the line?
Well, that's a great question. So, if we consider chronic pain to be a symptom, not a disease, right? Because, like you said, it's happening because of something, right? So, chronic pain is happening because the brain is misfiring pain signals, because there's inflammation, because your body, like in my case, my body is just my bones don't fit right inside my body, and so there's constant tension there, right? I would say most medical use is symptom relief. And the biggest reason for there's a couple reasons for that. One is that most states have a finite list of conditions or symptoms for which you can use cannabis. And with the exception of epilepsy, um, really with the exception of epilepsy, most of those are symptoms. So there are things like nausea, spasticity,
What about
chronic
cancer?
pain. It's not on there for cancer. It's on there for symptoms related to chemotherapy as treatment for cancer, right? So people using it as anti-nausea, appetite stimulation, mood benefits related to the treatments they're getting for cancer. So the reason that we don't see a lot of conditions on that list is because the research into a causal relationship between using cannabis and treating conditions in humans is extremely limited.
Yep.
And even when we do see evidence about the ability of CBD and THC to impact a disease state like cancer, it's in rats or it's in petri dishes. It's not in actual human beings because of the Schedule 1 status of cannabis, which makes it extremely hard to use it in research with actual people. So when the governments and whoever's making the decision on what symptoms and what to include on that list, it's a mix of who shows up to advocate for something being included on the list and what does the research say about the relationship between using cannabis and that disease.
Mm-hmm.
And they're much more comfortable with things that people use CBD for, like epilepsy, because CBD is non-intoxicating. And in fact, Epidiolex, which is a CBD-based medication for epilepsy, is approved by the FDA for use in the US, whereas Sativex, its cousin that's THC-based, is not approved for use in the United States. So that makes this false idea of what cannabis is really helpful for. You know what I mean? Like, because it's part, what do they select to be on that list, and how hard do they make it to add additional things to that list? And what is the burden of proof to show that research connects those things? Like, I'll see these research reviews that'll say, we reviewed all of the literature on cannabis, and we found very little evidence that cannabis is helpful for PTSD. And I'll say, well, how many research studies have we actually been able to fund and conduct that are high quality studies of PTSD in humans and cannabis? Not very many. And the ones that we do have focus on one or two symptoms of PTSD, mostly sleep, and not on the cluster of of symptoms that makes up PTSD. So it's like we're dealing with a biased deck of cards. And it's like if you take all of the aces out of a deck of cards and then you deal them out and you're like, well, nobody has any aces. It's like, well, yeah, because there weren't any in the deck. And so it kind of creates this false idea of truth when it comes to science and evidence.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree with you more on kind of that idea behind it. I personally, anecdotally, through a lot of direct sitting across from experience, that has always been my kind of thing, is to say, okay, of all the conditions that are even mentioned in this thing, two of them maybe directly, and obviously epilepsy shows very good research. There's plenty that goes on there, but I think cancer also is another one that in the future we may use cannabinoids for direct treatment. And when you say the thing too, research, research is so there's a couple of takes on it. There's the people who are reading a bunch of data and then trying to extrapolate some idea behind it, or there's people who are handing the actual stuff out to a control group and then handing out a placebo and side by side trialing things. And I see a lot of evidence coming from these data driven researches that don't necessarily give the whole picture of what someone's health is to begin with, where I always harp on the idea that why aren't we talking more about what this person's diet is comparatively to some of the other bigger picture things, or the condition names or whatever. But yeah, I am hopeful, and there's a lot of good research out there from other parts of the world. Raphael Mechoulam did some
There
good.
is, but I will just support that statement with the National Institute on Drug Abuse in the US funds 80% of the world's drug research. So, like, we've got our tentacles out
Yes.
there influencing others. And when we do see research coming from other countries, we, as the United States, tend to discount it because we say, well, they're not us. Humans are humans, but they're not the same as our humans. So we have a very hard time getting the US to, first of all, fund this kind of research internationally, and two, accept the results of this research internationally. And that those studies are still pretty minimal because of it. I mean, Raphael Mechoulam's lab and Israel has done some of the best
Yep.
research
Exactly.
on medical cannabis. But again, we find reasons why it's not applicable to our citizens for some reason.
Oh, and you nailed it directly. Because the research is being done on rats and not in humans, and we discredit that often as non-credible research to begin with, which is again, yeah. I'm often like, okay, the research needs to happen, and I'm fully into it. We've blown over the anecdotal part of this, where 50, 60 million Americans a year are using this thing as a upgrade or medical, right? Like, regardless of what they use it for, we're using it. And some of the cool glory stories we're seeing come out of it, I think sometimes get discredited too. And it's not that you should take it as well, 1 for 1, like you said. It's like n equals 1, and that's just my experience with it. And I think I've tried to bring all of those different conversations together into one and go, okay, more research has to be done. What does it take for this research that needs to be done to get done? And obviously rescheduling would be a massive move for that. But what's your take? What do we need to do?
So rescheduling would definitely help, because right now getting a DEA Schedule 1 license to use cannabis in research takes decades and like millions and millions of dollars. So there are scientists that have started down that road and have eventually just given up because it's so difficult and they don't have the funds to keep going. So making it easier to access cannabis for research would be really important, as would allowing researchers to use cannabis that they get at dispensaries. So, they still have, if you want to use cannabis for research, you have to get a DEA Schedule 1 license. You have to get it from a DEA Schedule 1 farm. And they used to have a monopoly on that. It used to only be able to come from University of Mississippi, which was like super crappy weed. Like it was the kind of weed I was buying in Texas in the mid 90s. And it was not applicable to what people were actually using. They have expanded that to where other people can apply for these licenses, but it takes forever. So the first thing we need to do is make it easier for people to actually use cannabis in research and do the types of clinical controlled trials that you're talking about. Because when we're bringing a pharmaceutical drug to market, for example, you start with preclinical research, which is rats and cells. And if you see promise there, you move on to phase 1 trials, which is very controlled, small group of people. Do you see an effect? If so, you move on to phase 2, which is a slightly bigger group of people, slightly less controlled to see if it still works when people are kind of making their own decisions. And then if that works, you move to phase 3, which is a huge number of people. And then you're really looking at what are the side effects? Who is this working for? Who isn't? That would be the normal path. Because we have not been able to take that path, besides making it easier to do these types of clinical studies, the other way is to go the opposite direction, which they are doing. So very excited. It's exciting. The federal government is funding a medical cannabis patient registry. And this is being run by Johns Hopkins and Realm of Caring. And it is basically a place it's like a repository for all of these stories, but like stories in a kind of a clinical manner, right? So who's using what are the benefits are they getting from it? What's their medical history? What is their experience? What are their positives? What are their negatives? And it's like, okay, so this isn't a controlled study, but if we can get a repository of like tens of thousands of people who are willing to write in and share their experience and do it in a way that's standardized. So it's not like, well, this person over here wrote a journal and this person over here has doctor's notes, but it's in a way that we can actually analyze. The idea is that from the ground up, we can start to build evidence versus from the top down, which is how we usually do it. And I think that this is pretty exciting because we did something similar with HIV and AIDS, partially because doctors weren't interested in helping people who had it for the most part. And also people were really stigmatized about talking about having HIV AIDS. So this is a way to gather a bunch of information from people without them having to kind of self-identify and become public, and to take an issue that is not widely understood in the medical realm and have the patients speak for themselves. So I do think both of those things are promising. Now, are those things going to help the person that's using cannabis instead of alcohol at the end of the day because their job is shitty? No. That is a totally different use case. We're talking about people that are using cannabis specifically to treat conditions or symptoms of conditions, which again, very, very important, smaller part of the population, but a good way for us to, like you said, say, this is affecting cancer, like not just the symptoms of chemotherapy, but the actual disease state of cancer. Because I see these posts on Facebook all the time. They're like, I had skin cancer and then I put RSO oil on it and then it disappeared. And like, good, but that's not what we call clinical evidence. That's not something that's going to get cancer on the approved conditions list. That's not something that's going to get it approved for insurance reimbursement. It's a great, hopeful story, but we need something more.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. I can't tell you how much I appreciate all of your perspectives on this thing. Is there any what are you most hopeful for in the next, let's give it a good time frame, next maybe 5 years to come of cannabis as a whole, as an industry? Because I think you talked about it too. We've moved from this being a thing into now what we're moving into the industrial side of it and what the impacts are there. What is your hope over the next 5 years for cannabis, and what do you hope to see of it?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm going to be honest with you both because I like you and we've had a good conversation. I'm not optimistic about a whole lot.
Yep.
Um, I know I have said many times that legalization is going to help a lot of things. It's not going to fix capitalism.
Yeah.
As we've moved from a movement into an industry,
Can I interject one thing? Because you said capitalism twice, and can I say that capitalism as an idea, I do you do you actually mean corporatism? Because like capitalism is like a great way to like market ideas, but we don't have like an actual, like it doesn't actually work because we don't allow it to work. So is it actually capitalism or is it corporatism? And
well,
I'm sorry
oh no,
for making that point. And your opinion is still absolutely correct. It's just me because I have to be that way. I
no,
apologize.
please. I have no problem talking about this. So I will let you know that I'm a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. I
Cool.
think that capitalism is harmful
Hmm.
because it reinforces power like differentials,
Sure.
and you've seen that in cannabis.
Sure.
So it's not just
Absolutely.
some. It's not just the big large guys gobble up all the small
Sure.
guys. It's who has the ability to have a chance to succeed, and it's also the way that these businesses they make money by getting you to consume things you don't need, which I think is the name of the game these days, and not
Hmm.
just cannabis, right? So,
Sure.
alcohol makes most of its money off of the heaviest consumers. We're seeing gaming now and sports betting coming on, and where are they putting all their commercials? It's not during
Wait till it's
like,
in the Olympics. Wait till it's in the
oh
Olympics
yeah, I mean
because
all of
it's
that.
in hockey
Right?
now. It's in fighting now. It's crazy. It is.
So I think that we live in a society where the monetary benefits of people buying without thinking and doing without
Sure.
thinking, and that feeding kind of the machine of
The
capitalism,
dopamine, the yeah,
yeah, is a problem.
scrolling, the doom scrolling of Wayfair.
And I see it happening with cannabis in a lot of
Sure.
ways,
Hmm.
that I don't think is healthy. And that's why I fight back against it because, just to get back to the clinical side, there's the minimum effective dose, which I am a huge fan of, right? So,
Me too.
minimum effective dose, the smallest amount you need in order to get the effect you desire. Most people in cannabis are consuming more than their minimum effective dose. Now, again, is that going to harm them? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on all those things we talked about earlier. Is it something that we should be aware of? Absolutely. Because the more you consume, the more your tolerance goes down, the more your tolerance goes down or goes up, the more your tolerance goes up, the more you need in order to get the same effect. It becomes very habitual. I understand the value of vape pens. I mean, I used one of the very first vape pens called iVapes back in the day. I was like, this is a game changer. They are very habit forming for lots of reasons.
I have
Um,
a old Magic Flight from back in the
exactly.
day. Yeah.
So, I mean, again, if we lived in a society where people were not preyed upon to make kind of these irrational impulse based decisions in order to feed a business model,
Hmm.
maybe I would feel differently.
Yeah.
But all of that being said,
It is a consumer packaged good now. Dave,
it is.
having worked in the dispensaries, can really attest to that.
But all that being said, it's better than people going to jail.
Yep. Bingo.
100%
Bingo.
all
A
day
million
long,
percent.
every single
Yep.
day.
Yep.
So if that's the trade-off, if the trade-off is, well, people won't go to jail and have their lives ruined and have their kids taken away and lose their job, and although all that can still happen to you because it's federally illegal. But if we can make moves in that direction, but we have to deal with cannabis becoming another consumer packaged good that's marketed and pushed at us,
Yep.
I'm okay. I can live
So
with it.
Well,
So
so so
what I'm excited about, because I
yeah.
don't want this to be so doom and gloom. What I'm excited about is that with dispensaries, you are seeing people that would never consider cannabis
Yep.
willing to try it.
Yep.
And I'm talking about people that want to use it instead of Ambien, that want to
Yeah.
use it
Bingo.
instead of Xanax, that want
Bingo.
to use it instead of OxyContin. And I think that's really important. So if we can bring those people into a dispensary because it feels legit and they can get a precisely dosed gummy, and that is going to be harm reduction for them using something else, I am for that all day long.
Yep.
And my parents live in Chicago. My dad has his favorite dispensary. He's 75. He goes to the dispensary. He gets his edibles. He gets his vape pen. And, I think it's a good thing. I think that's a good
Yeah.
thing.
Yep.
So that's what I'm
Oh, yeah.
optimistic. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I love, and I think you literally just said everything that Aaron and I do in a very beautiful way. We're for the access to the plant, right? I
Yep.
believe everybody deserves access to this. I've said a lot of times I want to hear the words essential cannabinoids the same way we hear essential vitamins, where vitamins regulate a naturally functioning part of your system. So does cannabinoids. They regulate the natural functioning system inside your body that's already there, producing these things. All we're doing is regulating those things. So you nailed it. And I think Aaron and I also say a lot of times, cannabis as an industry, nothing is legal about this, okay? There's
Nope.
a decriminalization aspect of it that's come about. It's just a framework for taxes to be made and for corporatization, capitalism. That's the whole thing that's going on there. Where, like you're saying, I think it's a trade-off that's going on where we're going, hell yes, access, good, beautiful. But then, as you're saying too, you're only not a criminal if you have this much of it because we arbitrarily made some number up and said that was too much, or you weren't driving and we could smell the raw or burnt cannabis. There's like so many little nuances that they're trying to nitpick, and the reason they're nitpicking is because they continue to make money. Law enforcement, it gets they're all in power, have their things the way that they do. And I'm not fully against the whole thing, but a lot of it is because they're enforcing these laws and they're making money by the enforcement of these laws. And at some point, I hope that this comes to a crash and everybody goes, okay, wait a minute. It really is bad that we've put people in a cage for this plant. It's the craziest thing in the world. And I hope that it never happens again, because I can't see, I with my eyes, haven't seen a vehicle or a plane or anything that's traveling or could package or hold more of it than some of these mega factories that already are holding cannabis. What you have as possession is minimal in comparison to what some of these mega factories have. And like you said, it sucks because all that's going on there is it's a capitalistic thing. Sell more of it, and overuse is happening at an all-time high. I think prohibition, I say it a lot, prohibition ruined the plant in some capacity, where it's not just naturally occurring in its environment where it was. We cultivated it inside. Now all those big tall sativas had to be chopped down. We started to grow more of the indicas. Wait a minute, you said THC is the thing that's getting me intoxicated? How do I ramp the plant up to have as much of that? All of these people, and I hear it constantly when I'm out and about and people are consuming cannabis in public or in smaller groups where they're talking about their potency levels or their whatever. I'm going, guys, you're missing out on so many aspects of this plant. For me, the important things to understand, I think number one is method of ingestions, because I don't think, like you said earlier, people understand what the nuances of it is, right? They don't know why they would consume an inhalable versus an edible. They just know that they would rather eat something than to smoke something. And because of that, it's given kind of these bad representations of what it's capable of. But, for me, again, my hope is that more people gain access to this thing and less people are incarcerated for it. And I think that professionals like yourself coming out with a PhD and putting yourself on the line and going, listen, these are the real things that need to happen, and the way that you can articulate them, like I said, I'm so grateful for you being a part of this fight, in the way that you are, and I love, honestly, the way that you're able to talk about this thing. It's been unbelievably insightful to me. I think that I could probably talk to you for hours and hours and hours, and I talk a lot, as you can tell currently, but
Well, we can consider this part one,
yeah.
multi-part series. But I do want to address one thing that you said at the beginning of that, which I think is so insightful, which is that law enforcement's making money off of people getting DUIs, off of people holding too much. But there's a synergistic relationship there, because the public is also afraid of people driving after using cannabis and people having too much cannabis. And a lot of that goes back to the propaganda that came with initial prohibition. So, like when we were doing Prop 64, we did a lot of public polling. And we found that the public was like, well, I don't think people should go to jail, but I don't really trust cannabis users. Like, I think that they're going to take advantage. I think that they're going to have to, if they have too much, it means they're selling it. If they get behind the wheel of a car, it means they're going to crash. If you have a dispensary, it means that kids are going to get access. Like, they had these ideas that were really based on emotion and not based on reality. And the executive director at the time of Drug Policy Alliance, Ethan Nadelman, said, which is something that to this day still really rings true to me. And cannabis legalization is for people who love cannabis, hate cannabis, and don't give a shit about cannabis, because you're not going to win just on the cannabis lovers. There aren't enough of them. So you have to have something in there for the people that don't like cannabis, which is, well, you can't drive and you can only have this much, and dispensaries can't be within 1,000 feet of a school. And you have to have things in there for people that don't give a shit about cannabis, which is, well, we're going to tax it, and the taxes are going to go to schools, or the taxes are going to go to roads. So, like, especially if you're doing a voter initiative, like, there has to be things in there that appeal to everyone. And because of the propaganda around what cannabis is, people who hate cannabis have very specific ideas about what's going to happen if you get access to it. So a lot of what you have to put in the law has to protect against those things that they think are going to happen. Now, one of the things they all thought was going to happen was that youth use would increase, and it didn't. It actually went down, which is something
because they don't give a shit about it now.
They don't give a shit. They don't want to do what their parents are doing. Like,
my newest working theory is that the governmentalization after Metric and BioTrack with BT, they're government facing. This is just the government's way to control the older generation's thing that they care about. The younger generation is the internet. The next generation will tell what it is, but this is just the government taking control of it finally. The thing that everybody cared about, the thing that we had prohibition about. Why did we have reefer madness? Because minority people are using it, so we want to, but now it's like a whole generation. It's just the government controlling this portion, in keeping them in line. It's the same thing that happens over and over again. And then everybody goes, well, look at history, but don't look at history.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
You know what I mean? Like,
making these decisions, like, they are the reefer madness generation.
Yeah.
I mean, that's who's still in control, and the government is our folks. Remember that, right? They're folks have a vivid memory of propaganda films, all the dangers of cannabis. Whereas my generation, Gen X, we grew up with Just Say No, but it was like, we didn't really believe it.
Nobody really believed it.
No.
Like the one nerd believed it, but nobody really believed it.
Oh yeah, I mean,
and then you come to find out now that DARE was just a multi-level marketing program where each officer got recruited and got a bonus for recruiting another DARE officer, and so on and so forth. And so it was just MLM all the way down. So of course there was a proliferation of that.
And there was a whole marketing thing behind it. I mean, it was
when you governmentalize something and absolutely make sure that you'll get paid, it definitely doesn't open the door for corruption or anything like that. Never, ever. Never in the history of ever. Oh man, this is absolutely fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Part one. Would love to have you on for part two. We're at 1 hour now, and I mean we're just at a fantastic spot to just stop. Um, was there anything else besides personalplans.com? I put that on our. I like to have something rolling because the younger generation on the YouTubes, they need to have something scrolling. So just having your website right there, I put it at the end of ours. Besides that, was there anything else that you wanted to plug?
Uh, I'd like to plug critical thinking.
Yes.
I love that. I love that.
So I just, I
Shout out
want
to critical thinking.
shout out to critical thinking. She's great. We don't get enough of her these days. So I just
Golly.
want to encourage people out there to, no matter what your internal biases are telling you, don't be too quick to listen to what people are telling you is the truth.
Shout
And
out to changing your mind
yes, and
and
not
admitting when you're wrong.
mind and admitting that you're wrong and reevaluating your relationships
That's
with the
right.
plants, which you need to constantly do. We have an endocannabinoid system. It does not stay the same through our entire lifetime. So
Right.
there comes a time when you may need less of something or you may need more of something. And like, that's okay. But think critically about it. We have too many powers that be trying to get
Right.
us to think
Right.
critically. I don't
So
even think
this.
that's active anymore. That's
Oh Lord.
yeah.
That's
But yeah,
fine.
but no, it's okay. But under the make tab in that
Mhm.
website, there are a whole host of recipes.
Yes.
So I
And
think
learn
that
here as well. It's
right.
actually
So
Dave
learn
and I
has
were going through this.
articles, watch has the YouTube videos,
My
and
mom's
make
gonna
has
go
recipes.
on make. My mom's gonna go on make and make
Yeah.
all of these things. It's yeah,
So yeah,
fantastic.
dive into that.
mypersonalplans.com/make or mypersonalplans.com/learn. Both great things. The shop. Don't go to that one. I'll ask
Yeah,
them.
don't go there.
That's
But
fine.
you can go to the watch. The watch tab has The Truth About the Plant, which is a short series I did on YouTube that
Okay.
answers questions about cannabis, like can you overdose? Can you get addicted? What are the benefits? What are the harms? But in a very straightforward way in 20 minutes or less.
I
So
love that.
you binge.
I love using cannabis to cope. I use cannabis to
That's
cope all the time
fine.
with my friend David Cope here. And come check out his show on Thursday night. It's Peace, Love, and Cope, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. Supportopeople.com, mypersonalplans.com, Dr. Amanda Reiman. Thank you again. And shout out again to our friend Mark, Chi-Town Hi-Fi, one of our OGs. No wonder he likes this show. He's been friends with you for 20 years, he says. He says you were always a great friend to meet up with. Out in California. So, shout out to him. Thanks for hooking us up with you. And thank you again for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Anytime. It's been a great conversation.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
See you guys next week. Peace.
Yo, ding dong, we're done here. Time to go.